Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report. This is the place where we bring you the latest headlines in black news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi.
And I'm Melissa. On today's report, Tylik McMillan from the National Action Network is here to discuss his recent visit to Capitol Hill with George Floyd's family. Derek Chauvin's attorneys ask for a new trial, and Milwaukee Council approves a settlement with an NBA player.
We'll show you why a federal judge is accusing former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr of deception. Former President Trump won't be back on Facebook anytime soon, but it might not be permanent. And we have some black history for you out of Florida and Alabama.
Genetic material from a 1993 killing reveals the wrong man was executed. Rapper YFN Lucci was charged in a gang-related RICO indictment. Hyundai recalls almost 400,000 vehicles. And we have details on a nationwide chicken wing shortage.
Yes, we do. We have all of that and so much more. So if you're ready, it's our voice and our truth. Let's get it.
To me, this reeks of conflict of interest.
Do we know if he actually waved a gun? We only hear one side of the story.
This just really did make me feel good that the justice system did what they needed to.
We're going to keep following this story, and we will have the latest for you. Good evening. Derek Chauvin's lawyer has filed a motion for a new trial. Attorney Eric Nelson wants the guilty verdict thrown out, citing alleged juror misconduct and violations of Chauvin's constitutional rights. Last month, the former Minneapolis police officer was convicted of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter for killing George Floyd. Nelson is alleging publicity before the trial played a part in Chauvin's conviction. Nelson's filing alleges Chauvin's constitutional rights were violated due to the judge's rejection of his request to move the trial outside of Minneapolis. The filing comes just days after Minnesota's Attorney General asked the judge to deliver a severe sentence to Chauvin for the, quote, particular cruelty he displayed in Floyd's killing. Under Minnesota law, Chauvin will only be sentenced for the most serious charge against him, second-degree murder. He's facing a maximum of 40 years in prison and is currently scheduled to be sentenced June 25th. So there's a lot in this filing, much more. Nelson claims the judge should have forced Floyd's friend Maurice Nelson to testify, and you'll remember Nelson invoked his Fifth Amendment right. I also want to get back to the jury part of this. Nelson claims the judge should have sequestered the jury, and in not doing so, that resulted in jury exposure to prejudicial publicity regarding the trial during the proceedings, as well as jury intimidation and potential fear of retribution among the jurors. What you're probably thinking when you hear he's alleging jury misconduct is something that has gone viral over the past couple of days. Juror Brandon Mitchell, the only juror so far to publicly speak about his experience during the trial. Juror Brandon Mitchell has gone viral the past couple of days because he was allegedly seen wearing a Black Lives Matter T-shirt at a Washington, D.C. rally. That's caused, a lot of discussion. Just want to note that was not at all part of this filing.
Right.
I think about this. We do not want to have a retrial. You think about what the family has gone through. They do not want to go through this all over again. We know what we all saw in that videotape, right? It's very clear what the world saw. So it's to me, it's kind of upsetting that I know he's going through the process of doing what he has to do as his lawyer, but I'm just not trying to hear it.
You know what? Great point that you make, Romeo. And Brooke, also to Brandon Mitchell, I am not really loving him right now. He also went viral recently about a T-shirt that he was wearing during a podcast. A lot of people thought, there was some people that thought he was wearing a George Floyd T-shirt. And then it came to find out that it was a Martin Luther King T-shirt. But I also just feel like he's doing a lot right now. And Romeo, back to your point, I know myself personally, and I know I can speak for a lot of people. We do not want to sit through this whole trial again and watch him die over and over again. And also, George Floyd doesn't get the opportunity to have a retrial. Derek Chauvin does not deserve it at all either.
I mean, look, he's doing his job. Eric Nelson is.
Right.
I'm just going to keep this really quick. So let's just, stick to the facts kind of with this situation. The fact of the matter is that the jurors are people, and they have their own opinions. The judge instructed them. The judge gave very coherent instructions as to what the charges were, and how they were supposed to deliberate. Change of venue wasn't going to change anything. These were global protests that happened in protest of police brutality against black bodies. So I don't care. He could have gone to Timbuktu, New Zealand. He was still going to have people that have been influenced by the protests and by everything that's happened. But more than that, they were influenced by what they saw with their own eyes.
Agreed.
That's the bottom line. So you know what? Eric Nelson, God bless him. He's doing everything that he can to make something stick at the wall. Mm-hmm. That's his job as a defense attorney. So that's really what it is. But a lot of what he has, filed as a motion has already been struck down by the judge. So it's just him doing his due diligence as a defense attorney. I don't really think that a lot of it's going to fly personally, but I really would hope that the jurors in the case, they stop talking so much. Brooke and I, we were talking about this, like how they just keep on talking about, what went on during deliberations. It's just like, can you wait a little while to just, let the cat out of the bag? Is what happened? Because
we were talking about this because but before Brandon Mitchell publicly spoke at that point, it had only been one of the alternates. And Melissa was sure that somebody else was going to speak soon. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah. She was right. But I want to hear more. I would like to hear from all 12. I'm on the opposite end of this. I would like to hear what was going on in everybody's mind, because they have a perspective that we can't possibly know. We can't, and their perspective and their personhood, it was so important to one of the biggest cases of our lifetimes that the judge, had to keep their identities a secret. I want to know what they were thinking. But I want to know everything.
I think that you are I think we all would die to know and be like, be a fly on the wall. We all want to know. But I think it's just like Melissa said, it might just be a little bit too soon, we don't want it to interfere with the case. Again, we have the other 3 police officers that we need to also be charged as well, that I'm just nervous that it might affect. But I want to know, I'm with you, girl. I want to know everybody's point of view.
For sure. You're right. Okay. All right, well, joining us now to discuss George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is the National Action Network's Youth and College Director, Tylik McMillan. Welcome back. How you doing, my man? You good?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you for joining us today. Now, last week, you were on Capitol Hill with attorney Ben Crump and the Floyd family advocating for justice for George Floyd Act. How did it go?
Yeah, well, I can't speak for all the leaders on Capitol Hill, but I do understand. I think they understand, as Reverend Sharpton would say, understanding the signs of the time, and the signs of the time is addressing policing in our communities. We understand the importance, most importantly, of ending qualified immunity and holding officers accountable so victims and their families have their day in court. I think the senators in the Senate on both sides of the aisle are faced with a moment in history where they have to decide which side they will stand on, and really addressing the signs of the time, and that is protecting the lives of Black and brown bodies that continue to lay disposable to a system that was set to protect and serve them.
You also met with Tim Scott. How did that go? What did you two discuss?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think, addressing Senator Scott, his comment that America isn't racist. America's foundation on which, was built on racism. When African slaves were dragged across the Atlantic Ocean by force into slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and systemic racism, which we see today. And now we see that new Jim Crow. And so I think, first addressing that in his comment, but Senator Scott being the leader of this bill for the Republicans side of the aisle, we just really talked with him about the importance of this bill and really meeting the scale of this moment and addressing the issue which is at hand. And being able to hear directly from the impacted families. We were joined by the families of George Floyd, Eric Garner, Botham Jean, Terrence Crutcher, so they can really feel what this bill means to these families and really understand the importance of this moment that the Senate has to act on.
So it's safe to say you guys were definitely on the same page when it comes to that, for sure.
Yes, of course.
All right, awesome. All right, well, who else did you all meet with while you were on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, we met with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas, Senator Scott, of course, as you mentioned, Senator Lindsey Graham, and of course, Senator Booker, who was leading on the charge on the Democratic side in the Senate.
Okay. Now, with that being said, do you think the Republicans were receptive to your visit?
Yeah, I think they heard from the families, most importantly, that this bill is a reality for them and it has the blood of their loved ones on it. But the reality is our lives are non-negotiable. Our safety is non-negotiable. We deserve to sleep in peace, Breonna Taylor. We deserve to be in our homes, Botham Jean. We deserve to breathe, Eric Garner and George Floyd. Our children deserve to play Tamir Rice. And so these things are a necessity, not an option. Mm-hmm. And so I think they understood the scale of this moment, but we just have to make sure that we get it passed in the Senate so we can see some legislative action being taken.
And that's what's so important, making sure they have that understanding. What can you tell us about your meetings at the White House?
Yeah, so our meetings at the White House was very similar to the meetings we had on the Hill, just really talking to top White House officials on the importance of getting this bill passed in the Senate. As we all know, it already has passed the U.S. House. It's just, standing in the Senate. And so we understand we want President Biden to sign this bill into law, and it's understanding that we are all on the same page. And that we must not put the livelihoods of Black lives on the back burner, but Congress must act to get these bills passed.
Yeah, Tylik, if our soulmates want to get involved in helping pass the Justice for George Floyd Act, what can they do?
Yeah, I will encourage you to call your senator, call all senators, and tell them the importance of this bill, and really encourage them to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and tell them that we cannot wait for this moment. So call your senator and tell them why they should vote for this bill.
Okay, let's switch it up for a little bit here. You also attended Andrew Brown Jr.'s funeral. There are still calls for the body cam to be released. What's the status of them releasing the footage?
Yeah, we're still in the waiting mode. As we know, the judge gave the order to wait, but we're continuing to demand, and we're not asking for it to be. We're demanding that they release the tapes of what happened to Andrew Brown Jr. They showed a 20-second clip to the family, but 20 seconds is not enough. We deserve, as we're talking about full transparency, the sheriff's department and the court must release the full body cam footage of what happened to Andrew Brown Jr. so we know exactly what happened. And so we're continuing to call on them to release the tape, not the edited tape, but we want the full tape of what happened to Andrew in North Carolina.
Yeah, that's the fear, that they may edit the tape. But I think across the country at some point, I think body cams should be released right away. Do you agree with that I think that should be something all across the board moving forward?
Yes, of course. I mean, we've seen in Ohio, Ma'Khia Bryant, and just in 48 hours, they released the tape. It's no instance where you can release 20 seconds, but not release the full tape. If somebody has seen the tape, regardless of whether, they're talking about the jury being able to see it beforehand, before being, chosen, the tape is going to be shown regardless. So why can't they show it now rather than later? And so that's why we continue to push, and we're talking about full transparency. You cannot be transparent if you're hiding the footage of taxpayer dollars that are going towards these body cam footage, for them to be hidden when the community and his family, most importantly, deserves to see what happened to their loved one.
You're so right on that. Thank you once again for checking in with us. We hope to see you soon. All right, Tylik?
Yes, of course. Thank you again for having me.
Yes, sir.
Great interview, Romeo.
Thank you.
You're welcome. DNA testing has revealed genetic material from an unknown male in the evidence collected from an Arkansas murder scene years after another man was executed for the crime, civil rights groups say. Liddell Lee was executed in 2017 after being convicted of killing his neighbor, Deborah Reese, in 1993. Lee's family wanted to get additional testing in the case last year, and lawyers for his family and the city of Jacksonville recently received new data reports, according to the Innocence Project and American Civil Liberties Union. This is all according to The Hill. The groups who released the summary of additional testing and fingerprint analysis say that DNA from a male who was not Lee was identified on the handle of the apparent murder weapon, a wooden club, as well as on a shirt wrapped around the weapon, saying the DNA appears to be the same on both items. I just want to add in here, the first thing was, that 5 fingerprints were taken from the crime scene. With this, they were examined in 1993, and they were determined that none of them were him. And, in my eyes, this is another situation where you have to place a wager of how much his life was worth. This wasn't a situation where he went to jail, he was able to be released, and then he can go and say, this is how much money I want to how many years I was in jail for this amount of time. this man is gone. And so, you know, it's sad that we have to say how much money his family deserves from this, but that's how I feel right now, that he needs to get all of the millions, whatever number, you know, they need to get that.
Well, not really. I don't know. The water's really muddy on this case. The reality of the situation is that his own attorney basically states that that the DNA that was obtained is proved to be incomplete and partial.
I did see that.
You know, she says that it opens the door to understand that there's the possibility it was him or it wasn't him, but it's just the water is like really murky here. The other thing is that he was you know, his DNA was discovered, you know, in 4 cases afterwards. 1 was a homicide, 3 were sexual assaults. So, you know, in terms of being like a completely innocent person sitting on death row, not really. But in the case of death row, there was like a really like there was like a push to execute a bunch of inmates around 2017 by the Arkansas governor because of, I think it was because the medication that they, you know, distribute in, you know, that they distribute when it comes to, you know, a lethal injection was set to expire. And so that's just a really interesting, you know, choice to make. Like, okay, well, let's hurry up the executions just before, you know, the liquid over here expires, so that, you know, the governor of Arkansas received like a lot of criticism for the decision that he stands by, and he stands by the decision to have executed Lee in this case.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. That's, I think, that is part of the criticism in this case. That's why a lot of people are familiar with this man's name from, like Melissa said, 2017. A huge bit of the criticism. People were upset with the state of Arkansas. This went on for a very long time. The critics are saying, point blank, you rushed the executions of 4 people and something bad is going to happen. And, you know, and so then those same critics are now talking this many years later and saying, look, this is what we warned you about. And to Melissa's point, it was a lot of people that they were attempting to execute. They actually killed, the state of Arkansas killed 4 people in 1 week.
Yeah.
But they were trying to, they actually had 8 executions scheduled during an 11-day period. But the other 4 people, those executions were stopped because of the courts. And this was all because of the state supply of one drug that they used in their lethal injections was simply about to expire. And as she said, Melissa said, the governor of Arkansas just completely dismissed the criticism at the time, saying there's no problem here. Like, we have this drug about to expire. We need to use it. But people were saying, you know, when someone's life is on the line, it can't be based. You can't rush at the ending of somebody's life. I think the Supreme Court at the time, there was a big back and forth because one of the justices were like, wait, we're talking about people's lives. And if the main reason that you're going to kill people is because of an expired drug, wait a minute, we've got to stop here.
Yeah.
And, you know, to another point someone just made, you know, when someone's life is on the line, is it okay for things to be murky?
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't all the way point to innocence. Life is, one could say, taking someone's life is much too permanent of a decision for the courts not to be 100% certain.
Yeah. And
this goes back to the push that people use DNA evidence. People want it to be 100% permanent, mandatory in all of these cases, and it's not.
Yeah. And the expiration date on the medication, what one part of the story that was really crazy was an article from back in 2017. Journalists who witnessed the executions witnessed the people who were like getting the the defendants convulsing and lurching forward, you know, as a result of being administered this basically expired medication. So it's just it was ugly across the board, this entire situation. So, all right, we're getting the cue to move on to the next story. On Tuesday, Milwaukee city leaders agreed to a $750,000 settlement in a lawsuit filed by NBA player Sterling Brown over his 2018 tasing and arrest, which was caught on body cam footage. The Milwaukee Common Council approved the settlement in a 14-0 vote, with one member abstaining. The measure will now go to Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett to sign the legislation, according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. In the body camera footage from the incident, Brown, who at the time played for the Milwaukee Bucks, could be seen being confronted by police officers for a parking violation as he walked out of a store. The situation then escalated, and Brown was eventually pulled to the ground while one of the officers shouted, "Taser, taser, taser." That's not all that they basically shouted to him. They allege that, or it's alleged that he also was, that they also shouted, they stepped on his ankle purposefully. And they also mocked Brown and any potential civil rights complaints that he might make. So the situation was really, 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 really ugly. And thank God it was caught on body cam footage.
Yeah, that's true. And you walk out of the store and this is what happened. We're talking about a parking violation, right? Why not just write the ticket, give it to him, be gone? Why do you have to approach him? You know, if I watch the video over and over again, and call it. Now you're making this a little bit on the edge. You're creating an atmosphere that it even shouldn't even be, right? You're bringing the wrong energy. And I did some research, and sometimes you think about black NFL players. Let's just switch it up to NFL.
Okay.
In traffic stops, 70% more than 10 times more, than white NFL players. And 70% of those are actually charged for whatever the violation is, where 30 cents is dropped, 30%. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is we're always the mark when it comes to that. And it's so unfair. And again, this guy was just coming out of the store. You could have gave him the ticket on a piece of paper, walked away, or put it on his windshield and be gone.
And, you know, you remember the criticism back after George Floyd was killed? Do you remember the criticism when the NBA teams decided that they weren't going to play out of protest? A lot of people criticized. There was a lot of support, absolutely. But a lot of people criticizing those players, saying, you guys don't even know what you're talking about. You're rich. And on one hand, listen, it is okay and almost warranted for someone to use their privilege to speak out for people without the same privilege, right? But also, this does happen to them directly, because this case right here that we're talking about is not the first time in the NBA. This takes me back to Thabo Sefolosha. Do you remember in 2015?
Yes.
His entire season was ended because the NYPD officers, 4 of them, broke his leg. He couldn't play. And at that time, his team, it was looking like that they were going to go to the top, that they were going to go far in the playoffs. His entire season ended, broke his leg for no reason outside of a nightclub. Officers at the time were claiming that he wasn't listening to orders, he was resisting arrest, not following commands. They arrested him, and he not only refused to take any plea, but he fought the NYPD. He completely won, fought them in court. He was exonerated of all charges, and I'm pretty sure got something like a $4 million settlement. But he took that fight just the same.
Yeah.
Both of them willing to completely fight for what's right. And so not only is it okay for them to speak out for everyone else, but it happens to them because being rich doesn't absolve you.
Doesn't protect you.
Yeah, it doesn't.
In some cases.